and with that, we're going to move on into Piltover and Zon, and our second champion of the day, and that is going to be the great Dr. Victor. So Victor is a 4-cost champion, 2/4. At round start, he creates a Hex Core upgrade in hand, and his level up is you've played 8 plus created cards. So the Hex Core upgrade is a 1-cost slow spell, fleeting, that grants Victor a random keyword.
So if you ever wanted to basically know what you have to obliterate, it's Victor.
If you let Victor sit around, you're not going to win the game, to be honest.
Yeah. So, and the crazy part is the whole leveling up part of Victor. You don't have to do it just through the turn. So it's not gonna take you 8 turns to level up Victor, because you can just create cards, which Piltover is very good at doing. So.
True, and when you manage to play 8 of those cards, he levels up into a 3/5. Augment, by the way, is every time that you play a created card, that this card is granted +1/+0.
So this keyword excites me, because I can see more cards coming into the game with that keyword augment and creating a whole new Piltover identity.
Very true. We've also got kind of a twofold situation with Victor here specifically, because you have to play 8 plus cards to level him up. Basically, you're guaranteeing that he becomes a 10/4 before level up.
The other thing I would like to add is that Hex Core upgrade is a spell. Now, Lee Sin's pretty OP, okay, guys?
Okay, we're back to Lee Sin.
So Victor, I can see Victor going into a Lee Sin deck as kind of a spinoff. It's probably going to be super jank. Victor belongs in a deck dedicated to making Victor good. But I can see Victor just kind of thrown in to generate spells, because regardless of the fact that it's fleeting, it is a spell in hand, and it's only 1 mana. So that's a 1 mana activation for Lee Sin, or just another spell card, or for any of your cards that benefit off of spells, or even Nightfall or discard. Victor generates that card every single round,
Mm-hmm.
whether you have the attack token or not.
And all that stuff taken out of the game, you're still giving Victor not just a random keyword, but +1 damage when you play it.
Mm-hmm.
All of that being said, we also have Victor's alternate form, what happens when you already have a Victor on the field and you draw into him, and that is Victor's Death Ray Mark 1. You deal 1 damage to a unit, create a Death Ray Mark 2 in the top 3 cards of your deck, and then create a Victor in your deck. And then there's a Mark 2 and a Mark 3, each one just goes up by 1 damage. And when you play the Mark 2, you create a Mark 3, and then when you play a Mark 3, you're just dealing the damage. What do you think about those?
This is pretty nutty to me. If you have the card draw to draw out these Death Rays, you will not only level up Victor so fast and get him so strong, you will do so much damage to everything. So the 3 Death Rays cost 1, 2, and 3, so you're paying 1 per damage. So 6, it's basically a thermogenic beam on champion.
Also, considering the fact that it is related to Victor, good to know that these are all created cards, or at least the Mark II and Mark III are, which means that when you play them, Victor also gets a +1 and closer to his level up.
Mm-hmm.
So a whole lot of synergy with Victor's set of cards that he gets, which, by the way, have you noticed that so far both Riven and Victor have had a ton of cards delegated to them?
Yes, not only that, but pay attention to the stat lining. Riven was a 4/5 or a 3/4 that turns into a 4/5. Victor is a 2/4 that turns into a 3/5.
Very true, and they both revolve around basically getting super buffed when they level up. So,
Exactly. So there's one thing that I am very scared of. That is the meta deck that uses the most broken card in the game.
Lee Sin.
and that card belongs to no.
It's just,
I just love Lee Sin. Look, that solely belongs to the Shadow Isles and to the card called Atrocity.
oh god, Atrocity is ridiculous. Yeah. No,
So,
Atrocity. Hold on, let me pull this card up for you guys that may not know this game very well. So, Atrocity is a 6-cost fast spell, kills an ally to deal damage equal to its power to anything. Meanwhile, Victor likes
and Ribbon.
and Riven both like to buff themselves up to super huge numbers. So you could spend like 3 turns buffing Victor up to 10 damage and then just immediately wipe out your opponent.
So yeah, it's like as long as Atrocity exists in the state it does at 6 mana as a fast spell, these cards boost that deck because it's just another way to play an Atrocity deck. Before, it was like Tryndamere, you played the Failure cards, the big buff stuff, and you just go in and go ham. Or you play the Miss Race that buff themselves that get huge, and you go in and go ham. Now you can play Victor or Riven, buff all your stuff, create an even more annoying card in Victor because Victor gets a ton of keywords, like he become elusive, fearsome, quick attack, double attack. You don't want that. You don't want any of that.
Oh, could you imagine a 10-5 Victor with double attack and quick attack? And jeez. All right, so correct me if I'm wrong. I gave Riven a 4, right?
Correct. I am also giving Victor a 4.
Personally, I think Victor's slightly worse than Riven. I want to give him a 3-5.
Until Atrocity and Lee Sin are changed, I'm going to leave Victor at a 4.
I see that argument. Alright, so let's see. Let's move on to the next card in Piltover, which is the Mechanized Mimic. So Mechanized Mimic also has the augment keyword, which is when you play a created card, grant me +1. It's a 5-cost, 3/4, and on attack it gets all keywords on all allies.
Gotta say, this card's probably really good with Victor.
Surprise, surprise.
Surprise. Also, this card would be pretty insane in a Poro deck. For those of you that don't know, most Poros have a keyword on it: Challenger, Overwhelm, Quick Attack, Elusive, etc. So, and those cards only cost 1. So, and you could play your keywords. You don't even have to attack with them. As long as they're alive, turn 5, you could have an Elusive, quick attacking Challenger that's 5 mana, 3/4.
That only gets stronger as you play more cards, thanks to augment. Yeah, honestly, I don't think there's a whole lot more to say about this card. It's just, in my opinion, relatively strong. I'd probably drop it at about a 4.
I would definitely give it a 4 as well, just because that augment keyword just makes it so much stronger in the Poro decks, because a lot of the Poro decks is about card generation. You generate spells and extra Poros that didn't originate in your deck, so you're going to be pumping out augment like crazy.
Yeah, also worth noting, I'm rating this card a little bit higher than Victor himself, because obviously it goes very well in a Victor deck, but it has places in other decks as well that are focused on like keyword effects. So yeah, we can go ahead and move on to the next card, which is the Neandroid.
And so continues Riot's fetish with cat cards.
Alright, so Neandroid is a 3-cost 1/3. It has augment and elusive.
So this is basically the Piltover card. It's a 1/3, that's Ezreal. It's elusive, also Ezreal. It's got augment, that's from Victor.
So basically it's what would happen if Ezreal and Victor had a kid. There you go.
Basically.
So yeah, the augment's super important here because all the created cards that you play will buff up that 1 damage, which the fact that you can buff up so easily an elusive card is pretty big.
Also, it hitting that 3 health cutoff is very important. As I said before, there's a lot of cards that deal 2 damage, and so having that extra 1 point does matter in the end, especially if you're playing it on turn 3 where there's not a lot of 3-cost spells other than the bomb that's going to be able to deal with it.
Yep. So I would probably drop this at about a 3-5.
I agree. I'm gonna put it at a 3 for the sole fact that I can see uh, it just not being good enough for the decks that it would go into,
Hmm.
but it being rare and or blue rarity instead of the purple pink rarity is going to make it more available to players.
Very true. Personally, I think that this card should definitely be an auto include in Victor decks because it's kind of, if your opponent doesn't deal with it, it's consistent damage because you're going to be playing a lot of created cards with Victor, which increases its power, and it's elusive, so you're going to be constantly sneaking that in and hitting your opponent, which means that your opponent now has to deal with both Neandroid and Victor, or just keep getting hit to the face. So,
Exactly.
all right, we are back around to another landmark. This one is the Hexcore Foundry.
This is the best card in the game.
Best card in the game, huh?
Yeah. So I don't. I come from Magic the Gathering, and in that community, there's a card called Rhystic Study. In that game, it costs 3 mana, two in a blue. It says whenever your opponent casts a spell, they must pay one or you draw a card. And that's basically what this card is, except everybody draws.
Yeah.
This card is insane.
All right, so let me explain the card real quick. It is a 3-cost landmark. Round start, all players draw one. I feel like I'm definitely going to disagree with you on this card because the big difference between this and the magic card that you just mentioned is that all players draw one. So effectively, what you're
Correct.
doing is you're spending 3 mana and a card in order to give your opponent hand advantage.
I can see that. It's just in my experience from playing cards, if you could draw a card at the cost of your opponent drawing a card, you would draw a card.
And by the way, I'm not saying that this card's necessarily the worst. I'd probably give it a 3 personally myself. But if if it had an extra ability that said when played to draw a card, round start, all players draw one, I'd probably rate it higher. But the fact that you're spending 3 mana plus a card in order to just get one extra card each turn is kind of iffy for me.
I will say there is two negatives to this card. The first one being it is a landmark, which means it takes up a spot on your board. That's -1 creature that you can play or attack with. But on top of that is, like you said, unfortunately, it has no enter the game effect. Or play effect. So you do have to wait a turn to get the reward. Those are the two negatives. But in Runeterra, draw is very hard to find outside of two specific regions. So
Yeah, that's very true. Draw is hard to come by in this game, which is why I rated it up at a 3. Just the drawbacks are too much for me to put it much higher. How about you? What's your rating on it?
this is gonna be the one where we disagree on. To me, this is probably one of the best cards in the game right now, and I'm gonna put it at a 4.5.
Okay, not quite a 5, but 4.5 is pretty
Yeah,
high. We'll have to
it,
see how it shakes out. See who is right on this one.
if it said even if it said draw one fleeting, I think I'd still rate it at a 4. Uh,
Ooh, really?
just because that if it said all players draw one fleeting card.
Mm. Yeah, no, we're definitely going to have to disagree on this one. But that's all right. You'll get to prove me wrong when you make some jank deck that just destroys me with it. So next up is a 4-cost spell called Aftershock. It is a slow spell that deals 3 to anything or destroys a landmark.
So here we are with Piltover's answers to landmark. Very well costed, in my opinion. It's 4 mana, which is more than I believe the Noxian one costs 3. That's Burn the Ground. Uh, but it can also deal 3 to anything, which is very nice. So
True. So it kind of misses out on that like premium sweet spot, which is 1 mana per damage. But it's only missing out on that by 1 point, and it also has the added effect of being able to destroy landmarks. Uh,
I think that was the trade-off when they designed this card,
yeah,
especially since they did put it at the uncommon rarity. I think if it was at the blue rarity or the pink/purple rarity, it would be 4 damage or more, possibly.
Very true. If it was a higher rarity, I could see it being 4 damage. But I mean, it's a very straightforward card. Just kill something or destroy a landmark, and I think that it'll do its job very well. I'm probably going to give it about a 3.
Yep, I'm gonna agree with you there. I'm gonna give it a 3. It's to me, it's just it's a good costed landmark destruction.
Yep, and with more and more landmarks entering into the game, super important to have. I feel like every deck is going to have at least one set of landmark destroying cards going forward, because we're starting to just get some really good ones. Just ones that if you don't have an answer for, like, you're screwed. That earlier one from Demacia, Star Springs, things like that. What's the one that makes you strike an opponent each turn?
Uh God, I can't remember what it's called.
I can't remember what it's called either, but being able to get rid of that one's super important. So yeah, just nice to see more of those cards. We'll go ahead and move on to the next card now, which is Iterative Improvement. Nope, that
It's
didn't
very
work.
good.
Iterative.
So I love this card. It's not a good card.
There we go.
No, I'm gonna go ahead and say that. Uh, it's not a good card, but it's perfect for people that love playing Jank, because what Jank loves to do is try and reach infinite combo and critical mass, and this card lets you do that.
So I'm actually going to kind of disagree with you. I think that it is actually a pretty good card. So it's a 2-cost burst speed spell. Pick a follower, create a copy of it in hand with +1/+1. So it lets you pick whichever follower that you want to start buffing up. It doesn't remove it from the board, it just gives you a second copy of it. And if you want that specific creature to continue getting stronger, you can, the next 2 times that you play this card, you can choose the same one and make it even buffed even higher. I think that it is very well costed for what it does, and the fact that it does it at burst speed doesn't really matter because you're just creating a copy in hand. But it also gives you more answers for, like, wide boards because it's creating that second copy.
Yep. It can also save you. If your opponent plays a board wipe, you may be going against an A-Soul deck or something, and you're about to get obliterated.
There you go. That is something that's important to note about the burst ability. If A-Soul is about to obliterate your entire board, you can pick something and make sure that you still have it. A stronger version of it.
Yep. Unless it was something that needs creatures on boards to be strong.
Right. So I'm thinking this is probably a 3/5 for me.
I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5. It's a good enough card to be put into decks, and I can definitely see it being put into any kind of deck, especially ones that play followers that grant card generation, like the discard decks that use the chump wumps and the clump of wumps to generate mushroom clouds to discard. Uh, the and even just the mushroom decks in general are gonna love that. The card itself is really good with Plaza Guardian, because one, it's a spell reducing Plaza Guardian's cost on its own, and it'll make it a 7/7 attacker, which with quick attack, which is what Plaza Guardian is. So
Ooh.
Plaza Guardian is a Piltover card for those of you that don't know. 10 mana, 6/6 with quick attack, but its cost is reduced by 1 for each spell you've played this game or you've cast this game. So you can end up with a 0 mana 7/7 quick attacker after you play Iterative Improvement on it.
So something else to think about. I just took a look at the full art, which has its quote on it, and it mentions the mechanized mimic from earlier. It's a pretty strong
Mm-hmm.
card to play on mechanized mimic too, because you're giving it that
Oh yes,
you're giving it that +1, and you're getting a copy of all the keywords that the mimic has on it.
and because it's a copy itself, it playing that second mechanized mimic is going to give you the augment proc on all the cards that you have in play.
Exactly. So that's a pretty strong combo. Yeah, I think that card's going to be pretty good. It's probably going to have its spot in a few decks that we're going to see. And let's see, what's our next card? It is Calculated Creations. So Calculated Creations is a 2-cost burst spell where you create an armored gearhead, ballistic bot, or neandroid in hand. We've already seen neandroid. That was the 1/3 elusive that we mentioned earlier. The Armored Gearhead is a 1 cost 1 1 with Augment and Quick Attack. And the Ballistic Bot is a 2 cost 1 3. Round start creates an ignition in hand. And it won't let me see what ignition is. Let's
You'll have to
see.
go to Ballistic Bot itself to probably see it. Yeah. So Ignition is a 1 cost slow spell with fleeting. Deal 1 to the enemy nexus. So every round it'll create one of those.
Hey, just constant damage to the Nexus for 1 mana. That's not that bad, to be honest.
And it's a created card, triggering your augments.
Very true. So you're just getting a constant 1 ping on your opponent and also getting +1 on all of your augments. So, yeah, I think this is pretty strong. I assume that since it says create one of these 3 cards, you get the option of which one that you want. Personally, I would probably pick Ballistic Bot every time. That or
I
Neandroid.
could Yeah, I could see cases where you pick Neandroid over Ballistic Bot, but honestly, I can't see you picking Armed Gearhead in anything except for the 1 cost deck, which is the one where you play a 1 cost card and it gets buffed by another follower that says 1 cost cards get buffed. So
Hmm. So yeah, it basically ends up being a 2 cost. Whoops, hold on. It basically ends up being a 4 or 5 cost card once you play the extra created card. But again, we're going into all the synergy that this set has. All these cards that get created just buff up the cards that you already have on the board as well. So the mana that you're spending is even more efficient.
I can definitely pre-changed Ezreal, the Piltover spell decks were very popular, and I can see with Augment coming into the game now, that Piltover spell decks are going to be huge again.
Yeah, I agree completely. We're going to be seeing a lot of it. Let's see. Rating wise, what do you think this deserves?
I'm definitely going to give it a 3.5. I think if it reduced the cost even by one of whatever you chose, it would be a 4. But having to pay that additional cost on top after the two does make it a little bit of a pain to cast. But it will give you a card that procs your augment at least once, and then if you, of course, you pick the ballistic bot, that's constantly creating damage and augment procs. So
Yep, I was definitely thinking a 3 here, to be honest. Honestly, just being able to. For me personally, what this card says in the decks that I have ideas for is this is a 2 cost, get your. Basically have 6 copies of Ballistic Bot in your deck.
once again, I'm going to go back to this. Lee Sin exists in
Yeah,
the game.
true.
Ballistic Bot creates a spell.
Yep.
Play Creations is a spell.
Bro, could you imagine just building a deck around Ballistic Bot, just having like 6 of them on the board and just getting 6 ignitions in your hand every turn?
The other insane thing is that you might just run Ballistic Bot in any of your plunder decks because it gives you a card that deals 1 damage to the Nexus. So for one mana, you got your plunder proc for the turn.
Yep, that's it. Like being able to activate Plunder guaranteed every turn is huge. We
I mean,
only go ahead.
as I say, it's if you if you think about it like this, if you turn 2 play your own ballistic bot, you don't play the creations, you play the ballistic bot. Turn 3, you can start your plunder procs, and from that basically gives your opponent a timer on to kill the ballistic bot because every turn it's getting +1 attack.
Mm-hmm.
On
Yeah.
top of that, if you're running the GP or the Sejuani, which both need damage procs on your opponent every turn, ballistic bot is going to be your go-to guy.
All these augment cards are ridiculous, to be perfectly honest. So the only 2 cards that we have left in this faction are the 2 that we kind of just touched on, so we'll kind of go through them really quickly. The first one being Ballistic Bot, which is the 2 cost augment round start create ignition in your hand. We've already kind of talked about where he would be good, so if you just want to throw a rating on it, I'm thinking probably a 3.5 by himself.
3.5 for sure. Possibly a 4, depending on how good he ends up being in augment and how good he ends up being in the Lee Sin deck variants that we'll end up seeing.
All right, and the next or last card in this faction is Armed Gearhead, 1 cost, augment, quick attack, 1/1.
Okay. So if you type into your search bar one cost, or you could put Professor Vaughn, Professor Space Vaughn. It's a 4 mana 2/3 in Piltover. It says when you summon a one cost ally, grant it +2/+2. So when you play Armed Gearhead after having your Professor out, that's a 3/3 quick attacker with Augment, which makes him significantly better than a 1/1.
That's significantly better. Personally, I'm thinking it'll have specific synergies, like with Professor, where you'll see it in those decks and not really outside of that. But it does its job well. I'm thinking it's probably like a 2.5 or a 3 star.
I'm gonna give it a 2.5. I think it's stronger than a 2 for sure, but I don't think it hits the 3 mark for me. Just because the decks it's going to be in, I might be able to reach tier 2 with those decks strength, but it's definitely not tier 1 material decks that it's going into.
Alright, guys, and with that, we are done with this faction, and we are moving into Shadow Isles, which only has 2 cards to look at. Isn't that fun? I don't know why I just tried to search Shadow Isles. The first card that we are looking at is the Evershade Stalker. So this one's a pretty big card, I think. It's a 2 cost. It comes with Ephemeral, which means that it dies at the end of the round. It is
Or when it
fearsome,
attacks.
or when it attacks. It is fearsome, so it can only be blocked by 3 cost or 3 power or more, and it can't block. It also has Nightfall, which creates a copy of it in your hand. Oh, and it's a 2/2 if I didn't mention that.
2 mana 2/2. Pretty normal stats. Obviously, it'll go great in ephemeral decks. Very good for Callista. You know, it's gonna die, and it even has recursion. So you play something, you play it, it dies, gives your Callista a thing, and you have another one in hand.
Mm-hmm. It's also a created card, so you know all those augments that we just talked about.
Yeah, you can definitely run this card if you end up running the Shadow Isles Victor Atrocity deck. That's probably going to be floating around at some point. This card would definitely be one of the cards that go in there.
Yep. So the fact that it's ephemeral kind of hurts me a little bit because it's just guaranteed dead every turn. It does give you some card advantage in that if you play it as Nightfall, you get a second cop or a free copy of it into your hand. Uh, I don't know. I'd probably put this at about a 3.
I'll give it a 3. I think it's worthy of a 3 for the sole fact that it does have fearsome. Being a 2 cost with fearsome is
Is huge.
very, very, very high on the list of good things. So it's it's definitely a very good card for any of the aggro decks. Obviously, great with Callista. Gonna be great with Hecarim as well because it recursions on a
Oh yeah,
ephemeral
this is immediately
attacker.
going into those decks. So,
So uh,
uh, I was trying to think. There was a very specific sentence that I wanted to say, and I don't know what it was. So rest in peace. Anyways, continue with what you were trying to say.
uh, as a card overall, I'm glad that they didn't put anything else on it. Because as it stands, Shadow Isles stands to be one of the strongest regions. So they really didn't need any more help. This is just kind of a nice utility card that can come in over some of the weaker cards in the other decks and adds utility to some of the new cards from this release as well.
Yep, I think which is pretty much why I rated it a 3 because it already has a spot where it kind of slots in nicely, and it does its job well while it's there.
Agreed.
So next up is the Pesky Spectre. Pesky
Okay, this card is
Spectre.
stupid.
Pesky Spectre is a 0 cost ephemeral card. It is a 1/1, and last breath, create 2 copies of me in the enemy deck.
Okay, so this effect is literally the effect I hate the most. The first time I saw it, this type of effect was in Hearthstone. Actually, I think it was a weasel, some kind of weasel. It was like a 1 mana 1/1 weasel, and when it died, it goes to your opponent's deck, and then basically you pass the weasel around, and it's really stupid. This one's even worse because it's a 0 mana 1/1 dies immediately, dies
Yep.
immediately, and creates 2 junk cards in your opponent's deck. So it just floods your opponent's deck. This is anti deep.
Yeah.
This is anti-combo. This card is very rude. Okay, this is.
If you're in deep and somebody adds cards to your deck, do you become undeep?
I don't know. That's something I'll have to test out, and we'll have to find out through play.
Hmm.
Cause yeah, this is just this is so. I would imagine deep works kind of like the same way as leveling up a hero. Once you hit it, you're there.
Right. But yeah, no, it definitely will slow down deep decks. Although to be honest, in my deep deck, I'd welcome it because I nearly deck out every game. But uh, like it has obvious potential in that it auto dies and then kind of stuffs your opponent's deck up. But then it can also stuff your deck up too, right? Because if they draw into it and then play it, they've got a free 1/1 on the board, which dies at the end of the turn, and now you have two more copies of it in your deck.
And that's why this card is so dumb.
Yeah.
Because it just creates two decks full of pesky specters that are just annoying.
Yeah.
So that literally, and I'd say 70% of the time is going to benefit you more than your opponent because it being Shadow Isles, you're going to have the Shadow Isles champions like Hecarim, Callista, Maokai, those cards that love to see ephemeral creatures.
Very true. And with that being said, I think that it definitely has a spot. I don't personally love it just because it's has the ability to completely throw off like your draw percentages in both yours and your opponent's decks. So I'd probably give it like a 2.5.
I agree with that. I was leaning more towards 3 just because it being ephemeral on a 0 cost. Uh, this card combined with Ravenous Butcher is kind of insane. That's 2 cost cards just on top of each
Bro,
other. You play
yeah.
Pesky Spectre, Ravenous Butcher, you got a 3/2 and put 2 junk cards into your opponent's deck.
Oh, that's a huge combo. See, that's why you're here. You're here for all the jank combos. All right, so you said that you were leaning towards a 3. Were you giving it a 2.5?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it at 2/5. I'll have to see it in play actually to see how much it does affect the game, whether it's more of a hindrance. Because right now, it as a 0 cost 1/1 ephemeral, it doesn't really outperform any of the cost last breath cards or 1 cost ephemeral cards that are in the decks
Hmm.
that I know of. So
All right, with that said, guys, we are moving on to our last faction and our last like 10 cards that we got to take a look at. We are looking into Targon at our last champion, Zoe. So Zoe is a 1 cost champion, rivals Teemo, comes with elusive, is a 1/1, and has the ability Nexus Strike. Create a super cool star chart in hand, or if you already have one, reduce its cost by 1. Super Cool Star Chart is a 2 cost burst spell where you get to invoke a celestial card that costs 3 or less. So her level up ability is I've seen you play 10 cards with different names. It's pretty interesting. When she manages to level up, she becomes a 2/2, still has elusive. For the rest of the game, when you summon an ally, grant its keywords to all allies. And then its Nexus Strike becomes Behold the Infinite instead, which becomes a 0 cost burst spell that allows you to invoke, which is pretty huge. Personally, I think Zoe is not necessarily a huge threat with it being 1/1, but at the same time, it's a threat that if left on the board, you are going to be super screwed.
yeah, I think it has a very good place in Targon, as Targon doesn't have a whole lot of elusive units that aren't like super expensive from the Celestials. So it being such a low cost, 1 mana 1/1 elusive, it's nice to just have some early damage to go down. I could see it being played alongside Nightfall decks, especially being 1 cost. Uh, Now the cool thing is with its level up uh, requirements, there are 2 other cards in the game currently that have similar requirements. They're both in Piltover, however. One is the 5 cost follower sub Percival, cat theme, 1/5 elusive card. When I'm summoned, draw 1. And then if you played at least 10 other cards, like Zoe, you grant sub Percival +4/+0. So it becomes a 5/5 elusive for 5 that draws you a card. Very nice. Then there's Pursuit of Perfection, which is a 5 cost slow spell, cat theme again. But this one says if you play 20 cards with different names this game, summon Catastrophe. Catastrophe is a 1 cost follower, 30/30 overwhelm. So it's gonna kill your opponent if they don't deal with it, and it only costs 5. But of course, it does require you to play 20 cards, so it's gonna take some time to be able to play that, probably past turn 5.
Oh, so yeah. Let's see. I think that Zoe's level up is super strong. It works with the keywords that we were mentioning earlier with one of the Victor
Augment,
cards, augments,
yeah.
yeah. I don't really see it being played alongside those though, so it's very much a different style of deck.
I could see a tier 3 kind of janky Zoe slash celestial finding deck, because as you know, Behold the Infinite, all the invoke cards, those create other cards,
Right.
so those go great with augment. So I could definitely see a Targon Piltover augment deck going. Um, but honestly, I think Zoe's pretty much a fair card,
Yeah.
just by herself.
Of the three champions that we've seen today, she is by far the worst in my personal opinion.
But
Uh,
that does not make her bad.
Not at all. She does have another part of her card that we haven't mentioned yet, which is what she turns into when you have her on the field already, which is Zoe's Sleepy Trouble Bubble. It is a slow 2 mana cost spell that stuns an enemy and creates a fleeting paddle star in hand. And the fleeting paddle star is a 3 cost slow spell. Deal 4 to an enemy that attacked this round or is stunned.
So it's a nice little 5 mana combo to deal 4 damage to something, and it's 2 spells, which Lee Sin loves. You know, Lee
Yeah,
Sin's Lee
Zoe Lee
Sin's
Sin, let's go.
Lee Sin's just got all the options in the world. Lee Sin it feels comfortable being combined with any region after this release for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to craft me some Lee Sins here. It's been on my list for a while, but I definitely need to now.
Yeah, there's so many so much spell generation, and Lee Sin thrives on that as well. I might even look into maybe some janky fizz decks.
I could see her working out really well in Aurelion Soul deck as well, by the way. Just giving you the
Yeah,
extra celestial cards that you need.
exactly.
All that being said, like I said, I think she is the worst of the three champions that we saw today. She gets killed by pretty much everything, and you're going to want her to level up, which means that you're going to be dumping cards into protecting her. I think that she's worth about a 2, personally.
Yeah. So just real quick, James, if you will, if you go to the filters, if you can turn on Celestials and click 1, 2, 3, and it should show you the 8 cards that Zoe can pull with her spell there.
Yep, got it pulled up.
So yeah, so obviously the 2 best cards to pull here are most likely going to be the 0 costs. 0 cost one, you get to do it immediately, and the upside on Moonsilver is just perfect for anything you do in Targon. Having a 2/1 challenger is great for dealing with elusive, which in general Targon doesn't deal well with. So Zoe being able to help with that is very nice.
Yep, and having just another free body and the serpent was fantastic. Also, you wouldn't be upset to see the trickster. You know, an elusive 3/3 is pretty strong as well.
Yep. Even Equinox can be very, very good, and as well as Crescent Strike as well. Moonglow is nice, but generally doesn't see as much play. And Messenger is just kind of the base Celestial card that is just like, it's okay.
Right, it's just kind of there. Draw power is nice,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
all right. So that's about all that we have to say for Zoe. Let's go to our next landmark, which is Targon's Peak.
Okay, this card right here is like a Jank Lord's Paradise.
All right, so this card
So
is a 5 cost landmark. At round start, reduce the cost of a random card in each player's hand to 0 for this round.
imagine on turn 5 you drop a Aurelion Soul, and
Yeah.
so this is the sequence. On turn 3, with 3 spell mana, you didn't play any of the last 3 turns. You Catalyst. You go up to 5 next turn. You play Targon's Peak. On turn actual 5, you're on 6 mana, but your Aurelion Soul got reduced to 0 cost, and you still have 6 mana.
Yep, this definitely has its place in Targon decks. The fact that it's random and affects both you and your opponent are both negatives against it. Uh, but just the chaos that it can create can definitely help some of the jankier decks that we've seen.
Yeah. This is definitely a card you can build around for jankness sake. Literally, you just put in followers and allies that cost 8 or more, and then you just fill it with spells. And Targon's Peak is only gonna, you'll never target anything bad with Targon's Peak, and there's a good chance your opponent won't get anything good because they're probably playing a more balanced curve line for their allies and followers.
True. But yeah, just the idea of getting blah, 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 just the idea of getting an Aurelion Soul out turn 5 for free, it's too good to pass up.
And
Uh,
then you have 6 mana to protect them or do whatever you want.
yep. So I think that this card has its place in certain decks. That being said, I also think its place is a little bit janky. So I'd probably drop probably like a 2.5 on this one.
I'm gonna leave it at a 3 because I think it is strong enough for it to see a lot of play and bringing out some of the decks that focus on the heavy hitters, the huge cards, especially the ones in Freljord.
Hmm.
There's a lot of really big dudes in there. So
Another thing that really concerns me about this card is all of the landmark removal that we've gotten.
hmm
Off the top of my head, are all 4 cost or lower, which
except
mean
for the 8 mana capture from Demacia.
true. But what that basically means is you can play this in order to get like a big playoff, but your opponent has the ability to take care of it for less mana than you spend on it.
Well, I just thought of the worst case scenario against Demacian decks. You play Targon's Peak, next turn he plays that 8 cost for
Yeah,
free.
yeah. He's like, "Oh, you want to give me a free card? All right, bro, it's gone." uh,
So much for the for your landmark.
yep.
That's probably the worst case scenario you'll ever see. Maybe there'll be some YouTube fail highlights of people playing this card and immediately getting destroyed. I'm sure it'll happen.
Oh, I'm sure. So our next card up is Super Cool Star Chart, which we already kind of went over with Zoe.
Zoe.
It is a 2-cost burst spell, invokes a celestial card that costs 3 or less, which we already showed off. Basically means that you're going to want something like. Hold on, my brain's dying on me. Here we go. So Celestials, 1, 2, 3. You're going to want things like the Serpent or things like the Trickster or Equinox, things like that. A lot of good cards to get out from it. At 2 cost, it's pretty good. How much is See the Infinite or whatever it's called? That's 2 cost, right?
See the Infinite.
Behold the Infinite, I think is what it's called.
Be- Behold, yeah, Behold.
Yeah,
The
Behold the
Infinite
Infinite's
is a
also 2
2 cost.
cost. So the big difference.
You basically have 6 Behold
Yeah,
Infinites.
the big difference is Behold the Infinite is just invoke, whereas the Super Cool is 3 or less. So
Yeah, and there is a Targon card that already does that already. I believe it is similar to the Solari Priestess. Solari Priestess does 4, 5, or 6. Uh,
yeah, it does 4, 5, or 6 on Daybreak.
so this just basically gives you the other half. Uh, so you're going to be seeing a lot of basically the full spectrum now. We've got the 1, 2, and 3. We've got the 4, 5, and 6, and then there's the 5 mana spell Star Shaping, which is 7 or more. So you got the full range to where you can target which celestial pool you want to grab from.
Exactly, and just being able to decide exactly what mana type of spell that you're going for is pretty huge too. So I definitely think that this is going to see some play. Um, I'm probably going to put it at about a 3.
I'm also going to give it a 3. I'd say it's just on the same level as Behold Infinite. Not stronger, not weaker.
Yeah, yeah, that's. Well, I'd say that it's a little bit weaker, but it guarantees that you get something that you can play. I don't know. It kind of works out.
Yeah, it has a negative, but it also has a positive to it. So to me, it's just the same.
Right. So our next card, I believe, is another card that we saw in Zoe, Sleepy Trouble Bubble, which is the 2 cost that stuns an enemy and creates a fleeting paddle star in your hand, and then paddle
Yes, this
star.
is the Zoe card.
Exactly, and then paddle star is the one that deals 4 damage to an enemy that is either attacked or is stunned. So yeah, we already talked about it in Zoe. It's pretty straightforward. It's a 5 mana combo that guarantees 4 damage and or just 2 mana to stun something for the turn. So I think it's pretty good.
I agree. The one downside, of course, is that it is slow. That's always unfortunate because it means your opponent does get to act before you can play paddle.
Yeah,
So they
which
could, recall it or do something else.
yeah, it being slow is the biggest drawback to this card because that also means that if it's your opponent's starting turn, their attacking turn, that they just get to swing in before you have any chance to stun anything.
Yep. But thankfully, Paddlestar does say something that has attacked already or is stunned.
True.
So you'll always get the second part off on the target that you probably wanted, but you might take damage in the process.
Right. So
I can definitely see this being thrown in. I think Yasuo is gonna love this card.
oh yeah,
I think
anything
Leona
that stuns.
Yasuo. I think Leona Yasuo is gonna be very happy to see this card join the ranks.
Yeah. So it's another kind of janky card that seems like it might have one specific deck that it fits into. Personally, I'm gonna drop a 2 on it.
I'm gonna leave it at a 2 as well. I just think the combined cost is just too much. I think if it was 2 costs and 1 cost, it'd be really good. But unfortunately, it being the way it is, it's just too expensive.
Agreed wholeheartedly. Next up, we have a 1 cost burst spell called Spell Thief. Spell Thief. There we go. So it's a 1
And here
cost burst.
is
Pick one of 3 enemy spells played to this game and create a copy in hand.
so if you played Hearthstone, you know about the discover mechanic, and much like Behold in this game, it's the pick one of 3. So this, I think if you're
Mm-mm.
can't see this card actually being good unless you're playing it in Augment. Sure.
There we go. Everything should be fixed now. I had a little bit of a computer glitch. I've lost track of what you were saying. So if you don't mind saying that whole sentence again because it completely left.
Okay, sure thing. So, like I was saying, like the Discover mechanic in Hearthstone and Behold in this game, it's the pick one of 3, which gives you a lot of availability. If your opponent's even playing spells that are good, you're going to pick the best one that you need at the time. Unfortunately, because of the variance of decks and because there's a lot of decks such as the Draven Jinx deck, there's a lot of spells you don't want from that deck. This could be a dead card in hand, and will generally only see play, I believe, in augment decks.
Yeah, I definitely see it in augment decks. Um, that being said, I think that it is a lot stronger than I thought it was at first. It does kind of have the randomization element in that it could be 3 cards that you didn't want to pick up with it. Uh, but just the ability to be able to use cards outside of your faction and have them be potentially huge cards. Like maybe you pick up a Nopeify or a Deny or whatever with this. That'd be pretty huge just to have that sitting in your
Atrocity.
hand. Or an Atrocity, yeah. Honestly, I think this card's going to see a lot of play. It's probably going to be played in most Targon decks, if I had to guess. And I think it's worth
Yeah,
a four.
I can definitely see it having a place. It's gonna have a lot of bad matchups. Those being the ones that are the decks that are almost completely creature based with very weak spells, and those that run only spells. You're gonna get so much variance against like the Piltover decks that it's gonna be hard to spot one. But because it's a spell that generates a spell, I'm gonna go back to it again. Lee Sin loves this card.
Yep. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth a 4 out of 5 rating. What about you?
I definitely give it at least a 4 out of 5. Yeah, it's
All
gonna
right.
see some variance in meta viability as the decks around the game change. But as it stands right now, it is definitely at least a 4 out of 5.
All right, so we're moving on to a card that makes me think of Thanos every time that I see it, Moonlight Affliction. Why is this not popping up? That's why. Boop. Alright, so Moonlight Affliction is a 5-cost burst spell. It has 2 effects: silence 2 enemy units this round, and on Nightfall, those 2 units can't block this round.
So this card, I've got to say, is hard for me to judge. I'm probably gonna leave it as a 3 just because I don't know how good it's gonna be.
Bro,
Because the other slots at the 5 cost spells have a lot of variance.
so I believe that this is going to be the third card today that you and I completely disagree on. I think this is probably the best card that we've seen all day, and I'm giving it a 5.
I
So,
can definitely see it being extremely good in Nightfall decks for sure, 100%. That's what makes it have at least a 3 for me. But my problem is the spells that you would replace it with in Targon are like Morning Light and Star Shaping, which are also 5 cost spells. And then there's Catalyst of Aeons and Blessing of Targon as well, which Catalyst of Aeons is your ramp spell from Feliord that you usually toss into Targon, and Blessing of Targon is grant an ally +3/+3, which is also a very nice combat trick.
so personally, I see this being less of a combat trick and more of a end the game trick. Being able to silence 2 enemies early game can come in handy, like if you're facing off against something that has elusive. The fact that it's a burst speed is super important to note. And then late game, if you just need those couple blockers to sneak through, you can drop something cheap and then drop Moonlight Affliction, and now your opponent can't block you. Plus, it also removes any grants that they may have gotten or any of the augments that they may be running in a Victor deck. So I think that it's going to see a whole lot of play coming up.
So let's see, how do they word silence? Remove all keywords, abilities, and ongoing effects. Doesn't affect damage or subtype.
Yep.
So my problem with Moonlight Affliction, the main one is the main deck I can think of it going in is in the Nightfell, the Targon Nocturne, uh, or the Targon Shadow Isles Diana Nocturne deck for Nightfall. Uh, it'd be great in there because you're all about attacking with Nightfall units very fast, getting that burst damage down, and usually finishing it off with uh, uh, either Diana or Nocturne himself. So the main, like I said, the main problem I have is the fact that it silences as a base, and it's 5 cost means you're generally gonna have to play either a useless spell or wait a turn to have the backup spell mana to be able to cast this for the no block. So it's to me it's not actually a 5 cost, it's a 6 cost card. So that's why I have to rate. That's why I've put it at a 3 in my mind.
Mm. That's understandable. We can all have our opinions. It's okay for yours to be wrong. All right, so we are just about done, guys. We got 4 more cards to go through. Next one up is the Solari Sunforger. Boop. So Solari Sunforger is a 4-cost card that has Daybreak, gives me lifesteal this round, and it's a 5/4.
I don't like this card. I'm just gonna. It just kind of feels like a filler card. I really don't feel like Targon has an identity around lifesteal, so it's just very hard for me to like this card.
So I completely agree with what you just said. It doesn't exactly fit with Targon's identity, but just looking at the card by itself, I think it's relatively strong. So Daybreak means it has to be the first card that you play for the turn, which is fine. It's a unit, and then it gets lifesteal at a 5/4 stat line for 4 mana.
Yeah.
And I think that the 5/4 stat line at 4 mana, just basically immediately gain you 5 health back that turn, is super strong. So,
So if you're playing an out of the way deck, which if you don't know what out of the way is the KDA card for Targon, 5 cost slow spell. For the rest of the game, allied buffs except for barrier are permanent, and you draw a card when you play it. So if you have that in play already and you play Solari Sun Soldier, he's pretty darn good because that lifesteal's permanent. But just as a base Daybreak card, he's kind of weak because it's just lifesteal. It's not lifesteal and quick attack. If it was like lifesteal and plus health, it'd be a lot better. Just for instance, there's a 2 mana Daybreak card, same rarity. It's a 3/2 that grants it +0/+4. That's basically the equivalent of granting it lifesteal because it's +4 damage you don't have to take or +4 damage for it to survive.
let's see.
And
Cost.
that card's called the
All right.
Solari Shield Bearer.
So, one of the things that I wanted to look at was just what other cards have that same 5/4 stat line at the cost.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a couple, like Ancient Crocolith is a 7/7, but to play him you have to kill 2 of your own allies.
Right.
Yasuo's close at a 4/4. Let's see. There's another 4/5, which is Brash Gambler, which to play me discard 2. So it looks like most things that have that same stat line or better have a pretty massive drawback. And I
Yeah.
already see those same
Well,
cards showing up in certain decks. So I feel like this card will kind of take their place and also has the added ability of healing you up.
yeah, I can see it being okay, but because it's on a Targon card, I'm just trying to think of what decks use Targon and would want to use that life.
Hmm.
It's just hard for me to see a place for that card because it has to be in a deck that pretty much doesn't use Targon. That it'd just be like, yeah, it's a Targon card, but it's the only Targon card in the deck.
Yep, and there are a lot of other 4 cost cards that are competing for its spot, like Stargazer or White Flame Protector, Mountain Scryer, etc. I don't know. I feel like it's a strong card. It might definitely be hindered by it being in Targon, but I think it's probably a 3.5.
I'm gonna do it a little bit lower. I'm gonna leave it at a 3, just because its stat line is super solid. Uh, but other than that, I just like the identity is just all wrong for me. And like I said before, unless you're actually running the KDA card, it just doesn't seem too good.
All right, so up next is Paddle Star, which we've already talked about with Zoe. That is not how you spell, wait, that is how you spell paddle, but I need to turn my filters off. Boop. So it is the one that is 3 cost, deal 4 to an enemy that is attacked this round or is stunned. So we've already talked about how this card works in combo with Sleepy Trouble. How do you feel about it being a card by itself?
I think it's amazing as a card by itself, especially at the 3 cost, because there's a lot of times where, especially as Targon, you'll be on turn 3, you'll play nothing, and you'll have 3 spell mana, and your opponent will attack you. Well, then you just kill it.
Yeah, just wipe it out. Yeah, there's not really much more to say about this card than what we've already said. I think it's pretty standard. It's pretty. It being slow kind of keeps it from being overpowered. I think it's worth at least a 3 out of 5 rating, though.
Yeah, it's definitely a 3 out of 5 card for me, just because that 4 damage on a 3 cost is very very nice.
Yep, and it's basically guaranteed because you're either going to be playing it in a deck that stuns things or your opponent's going to be swinging in, so you just get to wipe out whatever he's swinging with.
Mm.
Alright, next up is Starry Scamp. Starry Scamp is a 2 cost, 2/2, and he costs 2 less if you behold a Celestial card.
Okay, this card is broken. Like if you wanted Nightfall to be good, this is the card they made, and it's the lowest rarity. So everyone's gonna have this card. I fully expect this to be in a Nightfall Celestial deck, uh, just being able to flood the board and then playing the God, what's the celestial spell that there's a celestial spell that grants all your units +2/+2 for the rest of the game,
Yep, I have no idea what
wherever
it's
they are.
called, but yeah.
Cosmic Inspiration, 7 mana slow spell. If you behold a celestial card, grant allies everywhere +2/+2. And so basically, you'll have a 0 mana 4/4, and that's just gonna be real nice in that deck.
Yep, it doesn't have any extra abilities like elusive or anything like that. Uh, it does require you to have a celestial, so it might sit in your hand for a couple of turns until you get something off. And it
Thankfully,
is
it's pretty easy with Targan.
very true. It is also a 2 health card, which means that it's easily killed by most of the removal out there. I think that personally keeps it from being overpowered, but the fact that you can get it out for free kind of helps swing momentum into your favor because your opponent's going to be have to is going to have to dedicate mana and a card to getting rid of it. So I'd probably put it at a 3.
I'm definitely gonna put it at a 3. I think it's just a very great card for Targon, just because its stats generally in Targon you just need something to block to keep you alive till you get to the end game. That's pretty much how every deck works with Targon, and you're always going to be creating celestial cards because that's where your power generation is from. That's where your best cards are, and so that card's just going to be very happy in any Targon deck.
All right, with that said, we come to the last card, and we definitely saved the best for last, the Sparklefly.
I disagree.
Sparklefly is an obviously 5 out of 5, completely broken, needs to be nerfed immediately. So Sparklefly is a 2 mana card. It is a 1/2 stat line, and it has elusive and lifesteal.
So this is another lifesteal card coming in Targon. I'm not real sure why they're doing this, and it's another 1/2. So in Targon already, there's the 3 mana 1/2 with lifesteal and spell shield called Fledgling Stellacorn. And so to me, Sparklefly is just about the same. It's a little bit better because it's not only cost less, but it's also elusive, meaning you can usually sneak under and actually get some of that life back. But it just doesn't feel like it really matches the Targon theme. I would have been a lot happier to see more support cards to go with these lifesteal cards, but unfortunately we didn't get any support Targon cards.
Yep, very true. Personally, I don't see a whole lot of use in it. It's a 1/2, which means that it dies to pretty much everything. Its lifesteal is negligible because you're only getting one back, and it doesn't have any easy way to buff itself. Yeah, I'm thinking probably a 2 rating for this card.
Yeah, I can see it being thrown in some decks.
There you go. Almost
With
got it.
Mentor, with Mentor of the Stones. Mentor of the Stones is the 3 mana 1/1 support card in Targon that grants grants the support ally +2/+2, and when it dies, creates 3 gems in hand. So you can pretty much guarantee you're going to get in for 3 lifesteal damage when you support it with the Mentor of the Stones, and then you'll get 3 gems. Which, if you don't know what a gem does, it heals an ally and grants it +1/+0. So you can basically turn that 1/2 life stealer into a 6/2 or a 6/4. My bad. So it has some chances of being decent, but once again, that 2 health starting off is very bad, and it's the Targon doesn't have a lot of low costed cards to help it out.
All right, well, there you go, guys. That is the whole new set for Legends of Runeterra as a whole. What do you think about it, Justin?
I'd say this set, this release is definitely gonna shake up the game a lot. As obvious from my repeated telling, Lee Sin is gonna probably rise straight to the top as in the champion tier list. I think he's gonna be right up there with Callista, and possibly even Draven could see a lot of good work in here because, as you know, Draven creates Whirling Axes, and Whirling Axes being created cards triggers the augment procs. So
Yeah, I definitely agree. We're going to see a huge shakeup in the meta. I expect to see both Riven and Victor right up there with the other decks. I personally am super excited to play some Riven, and after seeing how broken the augment keyword is, I'm definitely excited to see some of that too.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna be pouring a lot of my resources into trying to make a janky Victor Lee Sin deck.
There we go. I don't know about you, but after talking about all these cards, I kind of want to play some. You want to do a few games?
I mean, we can.